Hi, I am Jolie Harrison. I work with the National Marine Fisheries Service Office of Protected Resources, and I graduated from the program that you guys are in, I think, in 2002. So, okay, cool.
Okay, so how did you get started with NOAA?
With NOAA. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Actually, Rob Atkinson had a lot to do with that indirectly. So I went to this graduate program after having like a 7-year hiatus between my undergraduate and my graduate program, and I worked in retail and actually was a district manager for a retail store. And finally, I was like, how did this happen? Because I was always very interested in biology and assumed that I would pursue a career in biology. So I went back to CNU, which had been Christopher Newport and did not have a graduate program when I was there. And I went and introduced myself to Rob and said, I'm really interested in biology. I got off track somehow. Do you have any suggestions on what I can do? So I had gotten into the program and registered for some classes, and he said, oh, well, actually, there's this internship program at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Gloucester. And he said they've been, he worked with them, and he said, let me, how about we go talk with them and see if they have something, and maybe we could make something work. And so we did, and they did. And so then I worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service so I did this internship and then worked for several years. And weird funding situation. I was a term employee, not a full-time employee, and they had to get rid of some people. And so I applied at NOAA because in the Fish and Wildlife Service I was doing regulatory Endangered Species Act conservation stuff, and so NOAA was looking for regulatory Marine Mammal Protection Act people, and I ended up moving from the Fish and Wildlife Service to NOAA. The Marine Mammal Protection Act, I implement 2 programs in there, and so one of them, so are you guys familiar with the Marine Mammal Protection Act, sort of? So it generally is intended to protect all marine mammals. So it's similar to the Endangered Species Act, except it protects them all, sort of in the context of marine ecosystems as well. And so there's a program that there are some provisions in that statute that allow for incidental take of marine mammals. So generally when you start with a statute like that, they put in a provision that says you can't take any. So in other words, you can't injure them, harass them, kill them, that sort of thing. And then they put exceptions in. One of the exceptions is if you're going to do something that's otherwise legal, like let's say Navy sonar for training, that sort of thing, that would otherwise hurt marine mammals, you can do it as long as you go through a permitting process and you work with the program to minimize your impacts and have some mitigation and monitoring measures. And so that piece of the statute is part of what drives what I do. The other program that I run is if you're going to do research on marine mammals or endangered marine species, you have to also go through a permitting process because you can, if you're going to be darting them and things like that, you need to have permission to do that. And so I run the program that does research permits for endangered and protected marine species, so like marine mammals, sturgeon, sawfish, and sea turtles, that sort of stuff. So primarily the federal statute, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and then since we're in a headquarters office, we sort of drive some of the policy that comes out of that statute. So I think a statute is sort of, takes precedence over a policy. So I work mostly directly from the statute, and then we develop policy there at where I work. There's several things I like on my job. One is it's very much, I love biology in general, so tying science to a statute that Congress and essentially the country decided was important to implement, and being able to bring science to help do that. And my job is very challenging. It has a lot of political attention because some of the things, like I mentioned before, Navy sonar, also oil and gas exploration and development, all of those things put noise into the water, and noise is a lot of what causes a lot of the impacts to marine mammals. And so our stuff is fairly controversial, so we get letters from congressmen, we get people that call the head of the agency, and so everything that we do is very fast-paced, but it's also very driven by science. It's very challenging, so almost every day there's some sort of threat or challenge to what we're doing, and I enjoy a challenge. So I love biology. I like setting policies that help other people implement the statutes better, and just the challenging aspects of it are good. Problem solving. So, obviously I think that what we do reduces negative impacts on marine mammals, but I also think that there are a lot of environmental processes that come into play when someone's going to do a large activity. There's the Endangered Species Act, there's the National Environmental Policy Act, there's the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, there are federal and state statutes. The Marine Mammal Protection Act is interesting because it has the public comment period component, and it also usually comes at the end of when other people are going through all those other things, so it gets a lot of attention. And I think it actually helps sort of coalesce people's attention and energy around activities if there are marine mammal impacts, because people find them very charismatic and compelling, so they sort of make people pay attention to things. Now sometimes maybe it's more attention than the activity deserves for all of its impacts, but sometimes it brings people and resources and non-governmental organizations to pay attention and potentially try and force people to improve something for projects that you probably don't want happening, or you want happening in a more environmentally responsible way for a variety of reasons. So I think that's good, aside from the direct effects of making sure that we don't have bad effects on marine mammals. I think sometimes, again, it draws attention to projects that otherwise people might not have paid as much attention to. So I guess I would just say apply for a lot of things and do summer field work and that sort of stuff if you can. The more experience that you get, I think, like different kinds of experience, the more receptive people are to hiring you. You just have to apply a lot, and you have to read what the application says and be fairly generous in your interpretation of it. I will say that federal applications, I'm not saying don't tell the truth, but I'm saying think about what the experience that you've had is and how you can sort of look at it in the light of what they're asking.